Even this episode 2471, and today's date is May 6th, 2021, and the title of the episode is The People Are Reaching the Precipice, Deep State Election Panic Off the Charts, The World Must See. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, the deep state, the central bank, the corrupt politicians, the mainstream media, they're doing everything they possibly can to bring down this economy. Now, it might not look that way, but think about what they're doing here. They're pushing the entire system to the edge. They're creating currency like crazy in the form of stimulus or infrastructure. And they're trying to hurt the small businesses any way they possibly can. This is not about helping the economy. This is about destroying the economy. Now remember, the deep state, the central bank, they like to use an event to explain why they need to do certain things. Let's go back to 1971. Their event was gold speculators. This is why we needed to come off the gold standard temporarily, which ended up to be forever. But they use events to push their agenda, just like the corrupt politicians. They use events to push certain bills. What happens if the good guys decide to use the event to push the people into a people-driven economy? What happens if the good guys present an alternative where people can see how their wealth can be protected, either with Bitcoin and gold? What happens if the people are shown how easy it is to move their assets? What happens if small banks allowed this? What happens if small banks allowed this and then the larger banks said, well, we're losing out, we better join up? What happens if the people can just push a button, move their fiat currency, their wealth, their savings, into a new system by pushing a button? What happens if there's a crisis in the economy? And when I say crisis, I'm talking about the entire system imploding, the stock market coming down, just like they tried to do when Trump was president. They tried multiple times. What happens if they're preparing for this? What happens if on one side you have the bad guys preparing the economy to fall apart, to try to push people into the Great Reset? And what happens if the good guys, well, they gave people an alternative. They know the playbook of the bad guys, and they know that the people, they're going to have access to move their wealth at a moment's notice or way beforehand. We'll be talking a little bit more about that a little bit later. But first, I wanted to talk about Biden here, because he has this plan, and this plan is to help the restaurant owners, small businesses across the country. Now, this is Biden's American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Now, remember, every time they push something, it is always the opposite. But when you look at this, it's not everyone being treated equally. They're treating certain groups completely different. Now, everyone was hit the same way. Yes, there are wealthier areas, there are poorer areas. But once again, those people that own their businesses, you shouldn't be treated differently because of your race, because if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, for any reason. If the government is going to help the people, then they have to help the American people. But under Biden's American Rescue Plan Act, it seems that the white people will be last in line for federal relief under his plan. So this is very interesting. The Small Business Administration will be opening up applications for relief funds under Biden's American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 to help those who are struggling due to coronavirus restrictions. Despite being subject to the same harmful restrictions, white men will be last to get any help. Now, to qualify, the business must be at least 51% owned by one or more individuals who are women, veterans, or socially and economically disadvantaged, and if the management and daily business operation of the applicant are controlled by one or more women, veterans, or socially economically disadvantaged individuals. So, isn't this sexism, racism? Because should it matter who owns the business? It should just matter that you have a business, you need help, you put in an application in, and you're saying, my business was hurt, so I need help. Period. That's it. But they're dividing the people over this. This is being done on purpose. This is all about dividing the people. This is why you see certain governors out there saying, listen, we're going to have vaccinated seats and unvaccinated seats. Remember, their entire plan is to divide the race, divide the people, divide people economically. They've been doing this for years, and they're still pushing their agenda. Now, we know the private Western Central Bank, we know that their system, well, it cannot go on forever. It will implode. This is why Klaus Schwab was out there mentioning the Great Reset. This is why they want their climate agenda system all set into place, ready to go, because it corresponds and integrates itself within the Great Reset. And we can tell that the central banks, they're a little worried about what's happening out in the economy. They're worried about inflation. Because when you see the inflation, people start to really take notice, especially when inflation is uncontrollable. And we've seen this in Weimar, Germany. We've seen this in many other countries where all of a sudden that paper currency is worth absolutely nothing. Now, the Fed, for many, many years, they always say, we're trying to keep it at around 2%. But you can see how inflation is not kept at 2%. Yes, when they manipulate the data, but people could see this every single day. Go back to 1913. Their mandate was to make sure that prices don't rise, or actually make sure the value of the dollar doesn't go down. Well, the products should cost the same exact thing as they were back in time. Even if you just go back to the 70s when we came off the gold standard. You shouldn't see products change in price if it's exactly the same thing. Actually, manufacturing of any product today is much more advanced. It's cheaper to do. So it should be actually cheaper than it was back in time. But when you look at a lot of the products, they're not. Why? Because this is the devaluation of the currency. Yes, they can use manipulation to show that, oh no, it's only 2%. Yes, I know this orange went from, 5 cents all the way up to $1 something, but that's just your imagination. It's still 2%. Same thing with products. When they start to shrink the products, if you look at ice cream and you go to, you purchase a quart, or if you look at paper towels and you see, wow, they're giving me a lot less, but the cost is the same. All they're doing is manipulating the sizes. That's inflation. That's the devaluation of the dollar. And they're saying that the inflation is only going to be temporary, just like the toilet paper shortage last year. Well, let's see, the toilet paper shortage, they had a shortage of toilet paper, then they created a lot more toilet paper to keep up with the demand. Can the central bankers do the same thing? What happens when they create You see the devaluation of the dollar. You see more inflation because there's more currency in circulation. No, this is not going to be temporary. Yes, they'll try to mask it with their manipulation using their manipulated statistical methods. Yes, they will try to do this. Now, what's very interesting, though, is that Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, they're both getting divorced. And it's very interesting because it seems that they're moving assets on purpose. And on We the Media, Red Pill Pharmacist put this out as a theory. Gates divorcing possibly cause of this. Keep a close eye on Jeff Bezos in the near. I have a theory about his recent divorce. As many of you may know, the economy will be having a major correction soon. Stocks could easily go down 50% or more. Bezos, being close with the CIA and the richest man in the world, probably knows this. He knows that he will lose tens of billions of dollars. So what does he want to do? Sell as much Amazon stock as possible because his entire net worth is in Amazon stock. But imagine if Bezos suddenly started offloading billions in Amazon shares. The stock price could crash. The entire market could crash from something that big. He could also get charged with securities fraud if he sells because he knows something will go down soon. So let me continue here. So what is old Jeff to do? Follow the lead of the only executive to get away scot-free after Enron collapsed. When Enron was about to collapse, all the executives sold millions of dollars of their shares. They ended up getting charged for this fraud, except for one man. He just so happened to divorce his wife for some random stripper right before the collapse. A judge ordered him to sell his shares and split the proceeds with his now ex-wife, so he was able to get away with it, all of it. My theory is that Bezos, he knows that the stock market will soon collapse. He wants to have a way to sell off his shares without getting in trouble or alerting the public that something is wrong. So he orchestrates some high-profile affair and his wife leaving him. He makes sure there is a ton of drama to keep it in the news. Then during the divorce proceedings, he is ordered to sell his stock so nobody thinks twice. And it turns out that this person who leaked the affair story to the press was none other than the brother of the mistress. He also just happened to come out and publicly say that Bezos and his wife aren't telling the truth about the divorce, and they have other reasons. So keep an eye on all of this. Now, think about what's happening with Gates right now. Is he doing the same exact thing? Well, when you start to put everything together and you start to look at this, it's starting to seem that way. And remember, the good guys, they can use a crisis just as well as the bad guys. Except I do believe the good guys, they're giving the people an alternative way of protecting your wealth, of moving your wealth with a click of a button. Now, am I saying that this is going to happen tomorrow? No. But it seems they're preparing for it. And what's very interesting is that James Turk said something very interesting about Bitcoin and gold. And let me just read this. This is what he said. Bitcoin is the currency of the future because it has proven to be an escape currency. It's a way of getting your purchasing power into something that's relatively safe. And he points out that Bitcoin and gold are in fact complementary to one another because the weakness of gold are the strength of Bitcoin and vice versa. What I mean is that you can hold gold in your hand, but you can't do that with Bitcoin. But gold can be confiscated while the cryptocurrency cannot. So the two are really complementary to one another. And if you feel that you need to own gold in your portfolio, and everybody should as a hedge, you might consider a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin in your portfolio as well. And I do believe the same thing. I do believe that both of these complement each other. Actually, I believe that they're countermeasures to the central bank system. And I do believe that everything's being set up in a way where the people are going to make a choice in the end. Because once you see real inflation, once you see the cost of items moving up, they might move up $1, $2, $3, $5. But once you start to see this, yes, people are going to And once it starts to take off, people will have the ability to move their assets with a click of a button. I would like some Bitcoin. Now, of course, the cost of Bitcoin is going to move up because if the fiat currency is declining, you're going to have to pay more for a Bitcoin. Same thing with gold and silver. You'll have to pay more. But I do believe you have the ability to move over to something that's going to protect your wealth. Because no matter where you're at, as the fiat currency continually falls apart and the economy falls apart, Bitcoin is going to move up and up and up and up, and gold is going to move up and up and up. So, yes, there are going to be certain people that get in at the bottom, mid-level, high level, and at the very, very end. But you will have a way to get out of the private wasn't central bank system. And I do believe that people are going to start to realize this. People are going to see it, feel it, and they'll have an alternative where they can protect themselves. The patriots can use this crisis to move the people, just like the central bankers are going to try to use the pandemic crisis, which is falling apart now, to move people into their great reset. Which way do you think people are going to go? I think in the end, they're going to pick gold, silver, and crypto. The patriots are in complete and utter control. Let's talk about our health. Collagen product sales are spiking, and for good reason. Collagen is revered for giving skin its strength, elasticity, along with its power to reduce wrinkles. This isn't just hearsay. There's thousands of studies to back up these claims. However, typical collagen supplements you'll find on the store shelves usually don't work because they're filled with cheap or low-quality collagen and sometimes harmful ingredients, which leaves users unsatisfied when they don't see results. This is why you need to use multi-collagen. This collagen is a solution for aging that America is going crazy for. It's the best anti-aging solution on the market with the highest quality collagen blends our bodies need to look and feel younger. I recommend healthwithx22.com. Try it for 51% off by going to healthwithx22.com. Let's talk about protecting your wealth. So you don't get the chance to buy sunken treasure every day, do you? Noble Gold has secured some of the original 20 Liberty coins found in the wreck carried up from the SS Central America on the seabed. The fabled ship of gold sank in 1857 along with 10 tons of California gold rush treasure. Imagine you can have a chunk of this exclusive time capsule from the depths yourself now. Call Noble Gold at 877-646-5347 to reserve your treasure. That's 877-646-5347. Now, the deep state, the mainstream media, the corrupt politicians, their panic over this election audit is off the charts. Now, remember, if this was a completely secure election, the securest election we've ever seen in our lifetime, a completely transparent election, a completely honest election, those individuals in the deep state, the corrupt politicians, the invisible enemy, social media companies, the fake news, they wouldn't be worrying about this because there'd be nothing to find. But since they're sending 100 lawyers, we have now Biden's Department of Justice getting involved. We have the mainstream media, the fake news, flipping out over it, saying it's all a conspiracy. You don't need to investigate anything because there's nothing wrong. Well, how do you know unless you investigate? Does the IRS audit people? Why would they audit people? Why would they audit companies? They've never seen Trump's taxes. Why did they want to see them? Why did they want to go through them? They have no idea if there's any crime in there. They're just guessing. Why would you do any type of investigation? Because on the surface, you don't know if there's something wrong. But if you get a tip and you start to investigate and you start to realize there's anomalies, there's crimes, there's things that don't make sense, you push further. So this has nothing to do with a conspiracy. We just want to make sure that the election system is secure and it's free of fraud on both sides. Republican, Democrat, Independent, you name it. It should be for the American. So we just want to audit it, and we want to make sure there was nothing going on under the table. And why would they be so afraid of this? Think about what happens when you catch someone cheating or catch someone stealing. They freak out. They scream and yell. They don't want you talking about it. Don't look there, look over here. This is exactly what they're doing. And you can see that the panic is completely off the charts. But the world must see how the invisible enemy, not just in this country, but around the world, how they have the ability to manipulate elections. You think when the people of the world see this, they're going to call into question their election system, especially if they're using the same exact machines? They're going to say, whoa, wait a minute. If this is happening out in America, this is happening here. And the world is going to wake up. This is going to be the biggest awakening that we have ever seen. And it's going to call into question everything the deep state, the invisible enemy, the corrupt media has been doing for a very long time. Yes, it's going to call them out. That day is coming, and it's quickly approaching, and they know this. This is why they're pulling out all assets to stop it. And while this is happening, the people around the world are waking up. They're reaching the precipice of destruction. And we're starting to see it in small pockets in this country, where parents are getting together and they're pushing back, saying that we don't want critical race theory. We don't want masks. And the boards, they're running because they can't handle it. This is just the beginning. This is also happening worldwide, where people are marching on the streets saying enough is enough. This is going to be global, where the global population, they reach the precipice of destruction. When you reach the precipice, you demand change. What do you think happened in South Lake, Texas? They demanded change, and they got it. What do you think is happening out in Utah? Yes, the same thing just happened. They demanded change, and they got it. This is going to happen all over the place. We'll be talking a lot about this a little bit later in this report. But first, I wanted to talk about John Kerry here, because we know from a lot of the Q posts that John Kerry was shadowing Trump, and he was meeting with Iran, and we know that Obama was doing the same exact thing. His time will be coming. Remember, he's hiding in the basement talking to Joe Biden right now. And we know that everything that Trump tried to do with Iran, John Kerry was countering it. Now we have the leaked phone calls. We have the evidence. And it seems that Chuck Grassley right now, he is saying, okay, enough's enough. We need to look into this. He's asking Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Acting Inspector General Diana Shaw to examine the allegations. And he said, as ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, he's saying, I'm asking that the records regarding meetings that Kerry had with Zarif be sent to the committees for review. His deadline is May 18th. Now, do you think the Biden administration is going to really do anything? Do you think Anthony Blinken and Diana Shaw, they're actually going to look at this? Absolutely not. Do you think Grassley is going to be looking at this? Yes, he will. And we'll have to see how this all plays out, because now it is out in the public realm, and it was not known of before. And now people know about it and what he did. Now, down at the border, the mainstream media is playing up the child angle. And we can see that this has been set up to make everyone think like, oh, look, he's reuniting all the children with the parents. People did. Because under Obama's policies, the children were allowed to come up, cross the border, and Obama would take these children. Some of these children were 15, 16, 17, and they would be sent to different states, which then allowed their parents to come up. Basically, they came into the country illegally, but the administration allowed this, and they pushed them into sanctuary cities. They didn't want to wait online. They didn't want to be vetted like everyone else. So basically, they broke the law and they skipped the entire line. And this is what came out of World News Tonight. It says, emotional reunions. Some migrant families separated under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy are being reunited under President Biden, including a mom from Honduras who is back with her two sons after over 3 years. Well, Richard Grenell responded to this, and he said, disgusting bias. These propagandists at ABC failed to say that these people broke the law, jumped the line, and they gave up their children so the children could live in America as minors without waiting in line. The children could have stayed with their parents. And that's exactly what they did, because the Obama administration, along with Joe Biden, they allowed this. And once again, unless you vet people, unless you know who they are, you don't know who the parents are. You don't know if they're human traffickers. Think about it. Take your home. Would you just open the door and let anyone stay in there without vetting them, without knowing who they are? Would you just believe them? Oh, yes. Can I sleep in that bedroom up there? Sure. Come on in. You can sleep up there. No problem. Would you ever do that? No. Same thing with this country. We don't know if these are MS-13 gang members. We don't know if these are child traffickers. We don't know anything about these people. But look what they're trying to do. They're trying to convince everyone. But people aren't buying it anymore, because now people know exactly what has been going on this entire time. Remember, Trump trapped them in all of this. Under Obama, they had all their mechanisms and everything in place, and they hid a lot of this stuff like the cages and things like that because, yes, the fake news works for them. They're the bullhorn of the deep state. So they never really reported on this, or if they did, they downplayed it quite a bit. And when Trump came into office, they hyped it up, even though Obama built these things. Trump, his administration was just using it because it was there. And they made it seem like he was the one that put it all together, which really was the opposite. It was Obama, part of his plan. Trump removed the mechanisms that they had in place where they can just bring people in, put them on a bus, send them over to a sanctuary city, and they just be lost forever. Trump removed that, secured the border, because he knew what was coming. He knew that Biden was going to call down to Central America and say, send everyone up. And that's exactly what he did. And since all their mechanisms are removed, what happens? You have a crisis. People can see it. People experience it. They question it, especially when there's a pandemic. That's what everyone has been watching. Now, what's very interesting is that we know that the social media companies, the deep state, the invisible enemy, they're pushing their agenda of censorship, of trying to control the narrative. And remember, this is infiltration from within. Now, what's very interesting is Google-backed RAND report recommends infiltrating and subverting online conspiracy groups from within. The initial analysis was focused on online chatter relating to alien visitations, COVID-19 origins, white genocide, and anti-vaccination. Now, the Biden administration, they support big tech crackdown on disinformation. So we have to go back to this. What is disinformation? How do you know if it's disinformation? Well, the fake news has been pushing Russian collusion for 3 years. Some of them are still doing it. And that turned out to be fake. Was that disinformation? Because on the other side, People were saying there was no such thing as Russian collusion. It's all fake. Well, that was slated as disinformation. Right now, we're saying there's election fraud. That's disinformation. What happens when election fraud is proven? Just like there was no Russian collusion. So who's controlling what's disinformation or what's not? That's why the founding fathers said free speech, unless you break the law. Because who's the judge? Who's telling you that's hateful? That's disinformation. Where are you getting your facts from? This is why the mainstream media, the fake news, and the social media companies, they came up with this fact checking that completely failed. How come they removed the fact checking with Biden? Why did the Washington Post discontinue it? Because they know that this was all BS. So Biden, he's working with big tech and saying, yes, I agree with this. Fascism. Just like Judicial Watch came up with the documentation that government officials have a hotline into these social media companies and they tell who they want taken down. Same thing in Michigan and many other places. So this goes way beyond Section 230. Now, YouTube, they're going to be spending about $7 million on 2 new journalism programs. One for small digital newsrooms and one for digital independent journalists. I wonder which journalists are going to be using this. Well, we know what it is. It's just a repackaging of the same thing that we have today, making it seem like it's different. Now there's different journalists doing this, but they're controlled by the same entities. Now, Twitter, they are now putting into place a mechanism that will call out mean tweets. So before you tweet, it will tell you, let's talk about our health. A new study released by the CDC reports that 49.1% of adults in the U.S. are obese. Typical recommendations for weight loss are to stay physically active, count calories, and cut out carbs. But if these recommendations work, then nobody would be overweight. The issue with these so-called solutions is that they don't get to the heart of the problem. This is why you need to use keto with X22.com. It is the quickest way I know to lose some weight. It works in a similar fashion to how the popular keto diet works. It melts fat, tones your muscles, and reduces cravings. So I recommend keto with X22.com. Try it today for 51% off by going to keto with X22.com. That is keto with X22.com. Well, maybe you should read this over and rewrite it. So basically what they're doing is they're controlling what people say. It sounds like now you'll be self-censoring. You'll be using precision of language. And you have to conform or you can't tweet this out. Now, in the beginning stages, it's just a warning. But later on, AI is going to learn all of it. And soon, the system will change it for you. And soon, people won't be saying what they really want to say. The social media companies, the deep state, the invisible enemy, will be speaking for you. That's what they're looking to do here. Now, it seems that Twitter, they suspended communications director's account of Elise Stefanik. Now, remember, she's supposed to be replacing Liz Cheney. Now, of course, they came out and they said, well, this was an error. It was a glitch. It was an accident. And if you notice, how come these glitches never happened to Pelosi, Schiff, Nadler, Biden, and the rest? Seems like it's always one way. And Elise Stefanik put this out. Big tech on the move. Twitter just suspended my communication director. An unconstitutional overreach, silencing our voices and freedom of speech. Republicans are united in fighting back against big tech tyranny. Millions of Americans will not be silenced. Well, you need to remember, they're putting all this in place, and yes, they're going to be censoring a lot more people. And when they're caught, they have to backtrack on it. These are not errors. These are not glitches. And they're preparing for something much, much larger. And what are they preparing for? They're preparing for the election fraud information that's coming out and everything that comes out after that is against humanity, because it won't stop with election fraud. That is just the beginning. And don't forget about Durham. He's still working on all of this. And don't forget about Trump, where he declassified the information. It's not gone. It's going to be used at the right time. And Mike Pompeo, he tweeted this out. Facebook's ban on President Trump is yet another overreach in the left's crusade to silence conservative voices. We must stand up to this tyranny. Free speech is fundamental right, and we must fight to defend it. Trump, he put this out on his new site, the desk of Donald Trump, and it says, the fake news media, working in close conjunction with big tech and the radical left Democrats, is doing everything they can to perpetrate the term the big lie when speaking of the 2020 presidential election fraud. They are right in that the 2020 presidential election was a big lie, but not in the way they mean. The 2020 election, which didn't even have legislative approvals from many states, which is required under the U.S. Constitution, and was also otherwise corrupt, was indeed the big lie. So when they try to sell the American people the term the big lie, which they do in unison and coordination, think of it instead as the greatest fraud in the history of our country. An even greater hoax than Russia, Mueller, 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 impeachment hoax number one, impeachment hoax number two, or any other many scams the Democrats pulled. Now, what's very interesting is that this was put out at 11:57. So if we go back to post 11:57, this is from April 15, 2018, and what does it say? Has POTUS made a statement found not to be true? Nothing stated should be discounted. So far, everything that he's been talking about seems to be coming true. And you can see that they're panicking. Now, when the election fraud information comes out, we'll be talking about election fraud in just a sec, everyone should know that there are backup plans for different people's sites. So you might want to ask them what the backup plans are, because I do believe when the election fraud is produced, it might not happen as soon as it's produced because they're going to try to spin it. But as more and more information comes out, they're going to go into a communication blackout. So if that does happen for the x22report.com, come to x22report.com. That is where everything is. If something should happen there, I have a backup plan. If you want to join the mailing list, you can do that. So this way I can email you to let you know where I am. Now, if you're listening to me on Twitter or YouTube right now, there is no X22 Report YouTube channel. It's a fake channel. They morph my voice. They change the graphics, and it's fake. The same thing on Twitter. If you're hearing this on Facebook or Instagram, same thing. The only places the X22 is x22report.com. Yes, you can find out where the official accounts are because there's a menu that you can click on. It's everything X22, and down below it says official accounts. And the official accounts are Telegram, Gab, Minds, BitChute, Rumble, and the Cloud Hub, and the x22report.com site. I would say go to the x22report.com site because that is the hub for everything. So let's continue. Now, it seems around the world things are starting to fall apart for these leaders. Out in France, we're starting to see that Macron has a problem. Now, Marine Le Pen, leader of the French conservative opposition party, has come out in support of the 20 French generals who signed an open letter warning of a civil war in France. Le Pen is currently polling first place in France for presidential elections to be held in 2022. And this week, Le Pen was also acquitted of charges of hate speech for exposing radical Islamist propaganda on Twitter. Now, she penned this letter, and this is what it says. Gentlemen, generals, officers, representatives of all armies and all branches, you have signed an open letter calling for our leaders to return to honor. Your initiative, rare in the military, testifies to the level of concern you have in the face of the worrisome deterioration of the situation in our country. Your outspoken but fair observation, made in very strong terms, constitutes a public challenge to ignore given your reputation. With the courage of those who have dedicated their lives to their country, you criticize our leaders very directly, questioning their responsibility quite legitimately, urging them to regain the ability to act and restore our honor. As a citizen and a politician, I agree with your analysis and share your concerns. Like you, I believe it is the duty of all French patriots, wherever they're from, to stand up for the restoration and even the salvation of our country. However, I believe that an open letter will not be enough to persuade our failing leadership to change its shameful ways. The recent pronouncements by the President of France on his project to deconstruct the history of France indeed show us these harmful tendencies are not the result of a movement of confusion, but from a political agenda powered by fundamentally destructive ideology. The concerns you so bravely express cannot remain a mere expression of outrage. However, in a democracy, we must look for a political solution which must materialize through a process of dialogue which must be validated by the French voters. This is the motivation for my political agenda, of my candidacy for the French presidency, with the objective of forming a government that will unify the nation. Many senior officials and leading figures of society have rallied to our cause. I invite you to join us in the struggle which is beginning, a peaceful and political struggle, which is above all the struggle for France. And we're not just seeing this happen out in France. It seems Trudeau is having problems in Canada. And we have Merkel in Germany. She is also having problems. I do believe that this is going to spread across the world, especially when the evidence of election fraud comes out. Now, with the pandemic, the people around the world, they are now pushing back. Because remember, everything that they put in place has nothing to do with science. It has to do with control. And here in the United States, the Department of Justice, they are appealing a federal judge decision to vacate the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's temporary federal eviction moratorium. The court ruled the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention temporary eviction moratorium is unconstitutional. The CDC under the Biden administration has sought to extend the eviction moratorium through June 30th. But the D.C. District Judge, Dabney Friedrich, ruled that, listen, the CDC overstepped its authority by extending the eviction moratorium because they don't have the authority to do this. Remember, the CDC, they put out guidelines. They can't infringe upon your rights. They can just make recommendations. This is what we believe. Now, I think every single American should say, whatever you put out there, we need to see the actual science behind it. Like when you tell us to stand 6 feet apart or 12 feet apart or 3 feet apart, can we see the actual science that led you to this before we're going to follow these guidelines? If you're telling us to wear masks, can we see the science behind it, which is peer-reviewed, it's a clinical trial, we can replicate it, and you tested every piece of fabric, and it works against the virus? Because if you can't show us any of this, everything that you're saying is your opinion. So, since it's your opinion, we don't have to follow it unless you want to show us that there's real science behind it. Because if there's real science, then we'll think about following it. This is how it should work. And every American should be going to the CDC calling for proof. Now, what's very interesting is that the WHO, very quietly, changed their definition for herd immunity. Now, this was their definition back on June 9th, 2020. This is what it said. Herd immunity is the indirect protection from an infectious disease that happens when a population is immune either through vaccination or immunity developed through previous infection. Now, very interestingly, on November 13, 2020, they changed it to this. Herd immunity is also known as population immunity, is a concept used for vaccination, in which a population could be protected from a certain virus if a threshold of vaccination is reached. If you notice, they just made it about vaccination. Previous statement about herd immunity, It says, when a population is immune either through vaccination or immunity developed through previous infection. Why did they leave that out? Very interesting, because they want everyone vaccinated. Remember, you have a choice, especially in this country. Now, like we said in the very beginning, the people, they are reaching the precipice of destruction. We've seen it already in Texas, many other places. Now in Utah, the Granite School District, the parents were there, the school board was there, and the parents started to chant, let's get rid of the masks. No mask, no mask. The parents are fed up. And the school board, they walked out. And you know what the school district, the parents in the school district did? They voted themselves in, just like in Texas. It seems that this is spreading. Take a listen to a small portion of this.
One senator and one teacher. Parents are fed up.
It seems when people reach the precipice of destruction, they're demanding change, and it's happening. More people need to do this. Now, it seems that infiltration from within is completely obvious now. We can see that certain individuals are put into certain positions, and we see another individual being put into a certain position. Katie Hill. This is Obama's former comms director. Now, she is going to be working for the NFL, just like we see other individuals work for the mainstream media. It's infiltration from within. They put people into key places, and you have these organizations go along with the agenda. This is why we see it in Hollywood. This is why we see it in the sport organizations. This is why we see it on the fake news. This is why we see it all over the place. Now, what's very interesting is that Black Lives Matter, they publish an updated set of demands on their website, which includes a permanent banning on Trump from ever holding office again. First of all, I thought this has to do with Black Lives Matter. All right, it's only the Black lives that they want to matter. And why are they putting out these demands? They have no say in this. So is this an activist organization that's going outside of their framework? It's starting to seem that way. And yes, they have a list of 7 demands. Convict and ban Trump from future political office. Expel Republican members of Congress who attempt to overturn the election and incited a white supremacist attack. And it goes on and on and on. Let's talk about investing. Now, are you saving for retirement or just treading water? Are you depending on stocks or mutual funds? When diversifying what you really need to boost your funds, do you know it's easy to move out of an old 401k into precious metals like gold? And that's predicted to go up to about $2,500 an ounce soon. This could be the answer for you. So call the team at Noble Gold. Do it this month and they'll gift you a free 22-karat American Eagle coin. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. So what does this have to do with Black lives? Nothing. This is a movement created by the deep state to push this country into a socialist country. This is part of their 16-year plan. But it seems that the states are fighting back. Florida, Texas, they're banning woke philosophies. They're getting rid of critical race theory. They're getting rid of the 1619 Project. And this is going to spread. Now, what's very interesting is that all the governors that are working for the people, that are allowing them to have their freedom, those governors, their polling numbers are going up. Governors like Andrew Cuomo, like Murphy of New Jersey, Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, and the rest, their poll numbers are going down. Take, for example, Cuomo. There was a poll that was put out there, and Andrew Cuomo's net favorability dropped by 28%, negative 28%. Ron DeSantis is up positive 2%. Very big difference. And yesterday we talked about how Murphy of New Jersey, his numbers are falling. People now, because of this, you can see their true colors. You can see who the dictators are. You can see their true agenda. Before, they hid behind their political talk. They hid behind what they wanted you to see. But when the crisis hit, you can see their true nature. You can see who they really are. Now, what's very interesting is that Biden supposedly won Georgia, but the people of Georgia, they don't agree with what he's doing. They don't like the direction the country is going in. They're saying it's going in the wrong direction. 52% of Georgians believe that Biden and the far left Democrats have pushed Americans down the wrong path. But I thought he won Georgia. I thought everyone wanted him. But now the state's saying no. And actually, 53.5% of Georgians oppose the All-Star game being moved from their state in response to the voter integrity laws. Remember, what businesses did they hurt? The black businesses. This was done on purpose because they don't like the voter integrity laws. They don't like these laws being put into place so there's no fraud. Remember, the only way they can put certain leaders into position is by using fraud. Why do you think these people have been in government for 40, 50, 60 years? It's not because the people love them. It's because they continue to cheat. Do you think Biden has been in office for 47 years because people love him? He's doing such a great job. He really benefited the American people. You think Maxine Waters is loved by the people because she's an incredible leader? No. Look at her neighborhood. But from all of this and everything the deep state has been trying to do, it's not working. People are seeing through this. Actually, look at the armed insurrection of January 6th, which really never happened. It was a false flag. You know what they found? They found no arms. Isn't that strange? It's an armed insurrection, but they found really no weapons. What did they find? They found a stick, a baseball bat, a taser. They found a police helmet, a knife, a hockey stick, and an ice axe. And did anyone use these things? Yes. That was Antifa when they used the bats to break the windows. The other weapons were found on the people. And when asked, why did you have them? Because we were afraid of Antifa. We were afraid of being attacked. They weren't using it in the attack. They were keeping them just in case Antifa was going to attack them. And these people weren't even involved. There were no real weapons. I mean, if there was really an insurrection, do you think someone's going to bring a bat? No. Do you really think someone's going to bring a small little knife? No, you're going to have real weapons there if you're going to actually have an insurrection. This whole thing was created. It was a false flag. And we know from video, from evidence, that Antifa, BLM, they were already in the building. They were bringing the people in. It's all a bunch of fake news as usual. Now, it seems that Liz Cheney, she is not having a good time now because according to a new poll from the Club for Growth, it shows that 52% of likely Republican primary voters said that they would not vote for Cheney next year, no matter the opponent. Trump, he is shaping the entire offensive. Remember, he's building the offensive with the Republican Party. What do you think he's going to do with the corrupt politicians? Well, a lot of these people are being forced out. What about the other side? What do you think is going to happen to them on the other side? It's going to be a very different game. Now, as we were talking about election laws, it seems that DeSantis, he signed the election security law. And this means they have enhanced voter ID in Florida. There's going to be limits on the drop boxes, voting by mail, ballot harvesting, basically securing So it's going to be very, very difficult to cheat in the election. And the White House condemns Florida election security laws. Why? Because they're secure and they can't cheat anymore? Think about Georgia. Think about Arizona. Think about all the different states like Wisconsin and the rest that have been implementing laws. Now, Trump, he tweeted this out about Windham, New Hampshire. He said, "Congratulations to the great patriots of Windham, New Hampshire, for their incredible fight to seek out the truth on the massive election fraud which took place in New Hampshire and the 2020 presidential election. The spirit for transparency and justice is being displayed all over the country by media outlets which do not represent fake news. People are watching in droves as these patriots work tirelessly to reveal the real facts of the most tainted and corrupt election in American history. Congratulations, Windham. Look forward to seeing the results." Yes, we're all looking forward to that. Remember, this is a movement. This is a movement to show the world the deep state system and how they do it. This is why there's a forensic audit going on right now, to show people exactly how they do it step by step. Not just saying, oh, look, there's a little fraud here and we have a couple of ballots that were mismarked. No, this is going to be a step-by-step tutorial showing everyone how the fraud was done in the 2020 presidential election. And they're going to show it so the entire public can see it. Now, out in Arizona, it seems that they're about 17.3% complete on auditing the ballots and everything else. Now, what's very interesting about all of this, you can see how the deep state, the invisible enemy, you could see how they're panicking because the Department of Justice, they're expressing concern about the Arizona audit, that it's violating election law. That's interesting. An audit is violating election law, but the fraud didn't violate the election law. Wait, let's even go back further than that. You mean laws being created by governors, attorney generals, secretary of states? That's not violating the election law because the only people that can make laws are the legislatures. And the legislatures didn't make any of those laws. So who's really violating the election law? It was all those states. But let's continue here. The Department of Justice expressed concern that the ongoing audit of the 2020 election results in Arizona may violate election law and lead to voter intimidation. It's always nice how they like to use voter intimidation, race. If you have voter ID, it's racist. They always like to use that. It's about emotion. That's what they use. The department notified Republican State Senator President Karen Fann that it was monitoring the state's audit of 2.1 million ballots cast in Maricopa County. The Department of Justice specifically worried that outsourcing the audit to a third-party contractor may violate federal election law that requires election officials to control ballots for 22 months after election. Now, we knew that this was all going to come to a head. We knew that they were going to fight back. They were going to push very, very hard. If they didn't, then we know that there was no election fraud. If they just said, oh, yeah, go ahead, do all the election forensic audit that you want, we don't care about that, we would know that there was nothing there. Since they're pushing back and they sent 100 lawyers, now the Department of Justice is getting involved, we know there's a problem with Maricopa County. We also know that this is going to spread to other places. This is why they're panicking. So the feds are attempting to get involved in the Maricopa County ballot audit. Now, this is coming from the conservative treehouse. Remember, previously the Department of Justice narrative was that each state makes up its own election rules. Now the Department of Justice is saying falsely that Arizona might be breaking federal laws. Their first concern, as predicted, centers around ballot security. Again, remember, the Maricopa County Election Board would not let the auditors use the county tabulation center, so the ballots and equipment had to be moved to Veterans Memorial Coliseum. Now the Department of Justice is citing that move as a potential issue for the security procedures. The first issue relates to a number of reports suggesting that the ballots, election systems, and election materials that are the subject of the Maricopa County audit are no longer under the ultimate control of state and local election officials, are not being adequately safeguarded by contractors at an insecure facility, and are at risk of being lost, stolen, altered, compromised, or destroyed. Well, we know that they're being guarded. We know that they're not being destroyed. There's cameras all over the place. It's completely transparent. Now, federal law creates a duty to safeguard and preserve federal election records. The department is charged with enforcement of provisions of the Civil Rights Act of 1960. This statute requires state and local election officials to maintain, for 22 months after the conduct of election for federal office, all records and papers relating to any act requisite to voting in such election. The Department of Justice's second issue is even more obtuse. They cite federal election law for voter rights, as the Department of Justice is worried that auditors will visit and intimidate people and places who have record of multiple ballots from the same address or non-residents. Both issues are moot. Why is the Department of Justice doing this? They're attempting to build a framework to undermine the results of the audit when fraud is uncovered. But we need to remember something very, very important. Feds have zero jurisdiction in state elections. Yes, they're trying to get involved. Yes, they're trying to set something up, but it will fail. Now, very interestingly, Dr. Kelly Ward, she put this out on Twitter, and it says, these are the servers for Maricopa County elections. The external drives that were loaded with nightly early vote totals are circled. Scott Jarrett, and it's actually a shelf with drives on there, and they're circled in red. Scott Jarrett said that they were taken to an off-site, undisclosed location nightly for safety by an employee or a Dominion contractor working for MC. So the question is, who handled these external drives? What was on them? Where did they go? These questions need to be answered, because that's kind of odd. And remember, they also didn't want to hand over the routers or tabulators. And remember, there were subpoenas that were issued by the Arizona Senate, which required them to hand these things over. Remember, they have system logs. They have a lot of things on here. So why aren't they complying with the subpoenas? They're refusing to comply. Everyone should question this. What don't they want people to see? Now, another thing that came out is that the Maricopa County, they admitted that they did not have admin access to the 2020 election. What does this mean? It means they ceded ownership of the election to their outside system provider. It means they weren't in control of the election. They were just spectators. They were watching. They didn't have the password. So that's another question that everyone should be asking. Because why weren't they in control of the election? Why was Dominion in control? Something's wrong here. And this is why we have the Department of Justice under Biden. This is why we have the mainstream media fake news freaking out. This is why they're panicking. Because once all this is going through, once everyone sees all of this, there's going to be no question whatsoever. Amber Walker put this out on Gab. If the Maricopa County forensic audit shows that Trump lost fairly, 75 plus million Americans will accept it. Unfortunately for the deep state cabal, it will likely show that 20,000 absentee ballots cast from addresses other than where the voter legally resided. Over 22,000 absentee ballots returned on or before the postmark date. Over 36,000 non-citizen voters, 5,700 plus out-of-state voters who voted in the state, 5,700 ghost voters, and 11,000 plus overvotes. We only need 10,000 votes to win. So, yes, if we did this audit and it was done properly, fairly, completely transparent, and it shows that there was no fraud, and yes, Biden won by all these votes, we would say, okay, it was done correctly. Now, the other side should do the same exact thing, because if the audit proves that there was fraud, that means they took the people's voice away from them. Yes, this time it might have gone to the candidate that certain people wanted, but next time it might not. And this is very important. Remember, as Americans, we have our constitutional right to elect our leaders. We're not relying on the invisible enemy, the deep state, to choose for us or to steal our voice. And it doesn't matter what side you're on. It doesn't matter who you are. You should want this right, because if it happened this time this way, it might not happen the same the next time. Now, what's very interesting is that Mark Meadows, he appeared on Fox News, and he said some very interesting thing. And Teresa Ann Marie put this out on Twitter. It says, Meadows just dropped some good info regarding POTUS. Trump is not necessarily waiting until 2022 to take action. In the next 2 to 6 weeks, we'll see additional platforms where he is able to communicate once again. Trump rallies are definitely coming soon. Now, this is very interesting, because I know he keeps avoiding the question of 2024. And like I said, if the elections aren't fixed and there's still fraud and the deep state, the invisible enemy, they still have the ability to cheat, what would change in 2024? They would just cheat again. You think they really want him back in power? No. This is why Trump is allowing the world to see this. People had to experience the fraud. Then they have to experience the exposure of the fraud. Remember, we're in the phase where they're exposing the system. And that's what people are going to see, not just in this country, but worldwide. And that brings me back to post 4,414, and Major Patriot put this out. He said, well, I just learned that Elise Stefanak's district is home to the 10th Mountain Division. And I do believe that these Red 1, Red 2, they weren't going to happen simultaneously. I think this is going to happen throughout this entire plan of the Patriots. We've already seen the POTUS Twitter removal. I don't think we've seen Red 2. Central Communication Blackout, Continental U.S. This is when they shut all communications down of anyone trying to say certain things. There's still people on Twitter saying certain things, on YouTube and things like that. I don't think that we've seen a central communication blackout just yet. And Red 3, Red 4, and Red 5, and Red 6, I don't believe we saw. Now, when I look at Castle Rock now, and I know a lot of people think it's a movie set and things like that, but I think it's referring to rocking the castle, rocking the White House. Who's in the White House? Biden. I think when this all plays out, we're going to see something completely different than what we thought was going to happen. I believe that all of this is going to come into play, and the White House is going to be rocked. And the world is going to see the system firsthand. And the people are going to unite